Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Leap. It is so nice to have everyone here. I'm going to give you guys my trigger warning. The month of February is about sibling loss. A lot of my listeners know that I lost my brother on February 14th, 2014. So I decided to honor the anniversary of his death this month. And it's a hard topic. And so I really encourage any of you who are listening that are going through the grieving process after losing your sibling to make sure you've got people in the room that you love and that you can cry with or process with if you need to. With that, we are going to start today's interview with a special guest, Hannah Mack. Hannah, thank you so much for coming. I know how difficult this conversation is going to be. And I just really appreciate you being willing to be here with us today. So, would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners, a little bit about you, who you are, where you live, and what you're doing?
My name is Hannah Mack. I am from the SelfLove, Michigan. It's towards the southern tip. I am 20 years old. I am going through my second year of college at the moment. I'm studying to be an elementary art teacher. I'm very, very excited about that path. And I'm very, very excited to be here today. I think that it's very important that this conversation that we're having, and I'm really hoping that doing this will help more people than I can touch individually.
Thank you, Hannah. I just thought this was really sweet. Hannah and I had some time to talk prior to the recording, and she is in a household of a bunch of siblings. And so she's locked herself away in her bathroom today so that she could have some quiet time. So I really appreciate that too. So, Hannah, let's jump in. I do know that, as I said when I started this conversation, this is going to be a hard one. We already know that this is on sibling loss, so that you lost your sister. Tell us a little bit about your sister before we get into the story of what happened. Who was she? What was her name? How old was she when she died? Just bring her to life for us a little bit, if you would.
My sister's name was Leah. She was 16 years old when she passed. And she was more than just my sister. She was absolutely my best friend. I have never felt that level of comfort and closeness with anyone I've ever met, not even my significant other. Like, she was absolutely my number one support system and the only person I felt comfortable talking to about serious things. She was a ray of sunshine. She could light up any room she walked into, and she was such a kind and caring person. It was astounding. Like, she would just walk into the kitchen some days and hug someone and say, I love you. I hope that you're doing well today. I hope that you're doing okay. And I can't even fathom doing that personally. I am so, I don't want to say I'm selfish, but I can't empathize with how other people are feeling. So seeing her being able to do that, it was very, very inspiring for me. She was an avid book reader. She loved reading. She read all the time. She was very into art. She loved to draw. Towards her death, she was really getting into Dungeons and Dragons. And I actually didn't know that until after she passed. I found her Dungeons and Dragons guidebook that she had completely annotated with book tabs and writing. It was really, really like a breath of fresh air to see that she was so passionate about something. I'm a little sad that I wasn't able to share that love with her, but I'm glad that she was able to find something that she was that passionate about and was that interested in.
Yeah. Well, I said this earlier, but I'm so sorry that you lost your sister. And one thing I'm going to say to all listeners, the reason that sibling loss is a deeply passionate topic to me, not only because I lost my brother, but what I really learned after losing my brother is how for many siblings, we feel like we have to suffer in silence because, there's this misnomer that we've got to be strong for everyone, especially our surviving parents. And I know Leah was not old enough to have a spouse and children, but that's also another piece where if we do have a sibling that's old enough to have a family, that the attention is very much on them. And I think us as siblings feel like we really have to hold people up. So I know, Hannah, you and I talked that there were some mental health issues going on. If we could maybe talk about what was happening with you and your sister prior to her death. Can you share a little bit about what was going on mental health wise?
So my graduating year was 2020. It was the year that COVID really hit America. And so by March 2020, a year before her death, I had moved out of my dad's house, which is where she and my younger sister lived. And because of that, we didn't really talk very much. She didn't have her own phone. And I think that that loss of communication kind of made her feel like she had lost me as a sister for a while. And that is something I regret every single day. I didn't go to my dad's very often just because I had moved an hour away. I didn't have transportation of my own for a while, and I didn't want to have to rely on other people to get there. So I think that in the combination of me moving away, us not talking, me not being able to be around as much has really affected her more than anyone else in the family. Because as I told you before the interview, Leah had called me her anger blanket. I was the number one person she came to when it came to venting about anything she was going through. If it was, people at school, if it was, an argument with her friends, or even an argument with our family, she always came to me about that, and we were able to work through it together. So I think that losing that and having to rely on a different support system might have had an impact. I know that about a month before she passed, we had a long conversation about what she wanted to do in her future. And she had told me, oh, I am having these differences in my gender identity. I don't think that I'm a girl. I think that I want to be something different. And I'm scared that our family would not allow me to be that. I had actually been out as non-binary transgender throughout all of high school. And I think she had seen how that had played out for me in a way, in terms of family support and even peer support. She knows that I went through a very hard time in school with my peers and stuff. And I know that she went through a very hard time in school with her peers and stuff. When I was graduating, there were kids in my class who would come to me and say, your sister's weird. I don't know why you like her. And say all these awful things, expecting me to relate to them somehow. And I would have to sit there and be like, well, she's still my sister. I don't understand why you think that this is okay for you to say to me. So I know that she was going through a very hard time with that.
She was being bullied in school.
Yes.
Okay. That's important because I think one thing that we haven't told listeners is that your sister took her own life. And so this is an important piece of what was happening for her leading up to the moment where she took her life. So she was being bullied, and your sister shared with you that she had depression. Did she call it that?
I don't know if she had, I don't think either of us had really called it depression just because we weren't officially diagnosed. So we weren't entirely sure. And we didn't want to say that we had something and realized later that we didn't actually have that. So we just called it, I can't remember what we called it for the life of me, but it was a really weird name. Something along the lines of the big sad or something. It was kind of like a funny name just so we could make light of it because we couldn't get the help that we needed at the time. And our help was each other.
And I want to just back up because another important piece, I think, to this story is that you had your own struggles that you shared with me. And you had also tried to take your life. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that? And also how your sister reacted to that? Because I think you said, was it 6 months before she died that you had taken the last attempt on your own life?
My last attempt on my own life was in December of 2019. My sister took her life in March 2021. I had just started therapy about 6 months prior to her death, though.
Okay. When you tried to take your life, how did your sister react to that? What was her response?
I didn't directly tell her what had happened. I had told my dad, my stepmom knew about it. A couple of my older sisters knew about it. I don't know if maybe she had heard through the grapevine, but I could tell visibly that after she had found out in some way that there was a visible change in her, kind of like her behavior around me. It was like she's kind of walking on eggshells. And seeing her reaction to that really kind of shocked me. And it made me realize that I don't want to leave, because she needs me. She needs me. My family needs me. My significant other needs me. My friends need me. I'm needed. And that was something that I couldn't see before. That was something that was very difficult for me to recognize. But after seeing her change so much from just hearing about it, it really made me realize that I wanted to live and I wanted to stay here.
So that was your last attempt. Okay, yes. So then you decide, you're like, I want to be here. I want to live, which is huge. Did you become more hyper aware of your sister's mental health challenges now that, you kind of had, I don't want to call it, I don't know what you would call it, this awakening or this newfound desire to live? Because you said that there had been other attempts besides that last one in December. What happened for you, if anything, after this last attempt in your relationship with your sister? I know you just said it felt like maybe your sister felt like she was walking on eggshells around you. Did you guys get closer? Were you hyper aware of what was happening with her? Talk to us a little bit about your process.
I feel honestly as if that time was kind of when I started pulling myself away from her because I didn't want her to have to walk on eggshells around me. It was just a few months before I moved out of my dad's house. I was so constantly overwhelmed with work. I worked 5 days a week after school. And on the weekends, I went to my mom's house, which was a completely different house. I wasn't around as much. And I feel like I'd kind of intentionally done that just because I didn't want to have to hurt her anymore.
Okay.
So I feel like, that it kind of drained our relationship a little bit. And me moving out afterwards really didn't help at all.
Right, because that's when you felt like she had lost you for a little while. Okay, so let's speed up time. So what happens next? When do you and your sister kind of reunite, if you will? Because you moved back into your parents' house, it sounds like, at some point, right?
I had visited a couple times more. I currently live with my boyfriend and his family. It's
Oh,
about an
okay.
hour away from my parents' house. So I think by the time she had gotten her own phone so that I could talk to her, which was probably, I would say, 5 months before her passing, I had visited my dad's maybe a total of 5 times. It hadn't been very much. Like, as I said, I didn't have a car yet. I didn't have a way to reach her. And I didn't have a way to really be around without relying on other people. And I didn't want to have to rely on other people just to do that. So when she finally got her phone, it was like, I felt like a kid on Christmas. I was so excited. I was ecstatic. I was like, oh my God, I missed you so much. I feel like I haven't talked to you in years. And from that point on, we talked pretty much every day. For a solid 5 months, we talked about everything. We talked about her life, talked about how school was going, how her friends were, any new friends that she had. I felt like our relationship was really becoming, we were as close as we were when we were children. And that was really refreshing to me.
Okay, so this was 5 months before. And so lead us down that path. Did you have any idea that your sister was thinking about taking her life? Did she talk to you about it at all? I know everything is hindsight now, and please only talk about what's comfortable for you. I do not want to push you down a path that you do not want to go down.
As I had said before, my sister had called me her anger blanket. She told me everything when we were children. And I think most of the conversations that we had after she'd gotten her phone were about hindsight. It was like, oh, when we were younger, this is what we used to do. That was so fun. She didn't really talk very much about how she felt. She'd said a couple times, oh, like, can you hit me with your car or something? Or can you just put a gun to my head? But as we were growing up, we always, made jokes like that because we had to make light of the situation. It was our only way of dealing with it. And so I had always been like, oh, well, I can't do that. You're going to be my maid of honor at my wedding. You're my best friend. I can't lose you. And she'd always kind of drop it after that. I think looking back, I definitely missed a few cues there to tell her how much she meant to me and how much I really, truly needed her instead of just saying, oh, you're my best friend. I need you here. I'd never been a very big person of telling people that I love them or that I miss them. And I really don't think that I told her that enough, ever. I don't even really remember ever telling her that after she'd gotten her phone.
Hannah, I know that this is hard. I'm probably going to start to cry too, but your sister knew that you loved her. I can almost guarantee you that. She called you her anger blanket. And sometimes, even if we can't tell people, what's even more powerful is the way that we show them. So just take a minute.
I know I told her several times, starting in January when I turned 19. I told her, oh, I'm going to get a car this year. I finally have my license. I'm going to get a car this year. And then I'll be able to pick you up from school and we can go shopping or we can just hang out and you'll be able to come over to my house and hang out and it'll be awesome. And she'd always be like, yeah, that's going to be so cool. I'm so excited for that. And I'd always told her, just hold on, I'm going to get a car. I'm going to be able to drive there. We'll be able to see each other again. She passed 3 months before I got my car. So the first time that I had gone to my parents' house since I started talking to her again was, for her death. And that was really kind of an eye-opening thing. It was like I wasn't supposed to be here without her. She was supposed to be here with me, and she's not. And it was a very eye-opening experience for that.
So let's talk about that. It has not even been a year since you lost your sister. And what I would like to talk about now is what you have done since your sister's death and the way it's impacted your family. Because I think what I have learned, certainly through writing my book on sibling loss, and I interviewed siblings all over the world. And one thing that I have learned is how deeply a death like this impacts the entire family. Everybody deals with grief differently. And I really want to hear how you have dealt with it and what that has looked like for your family and your other siblings. And what I mean by that is I know you can't be inside their head, but from your perspective, the way that your sister's death has impacted the family unit. But let's keep it personal. So talk to us. How did you deal with your sister's death?
After my sister's death, I think I went completely numb. I don't remember a lot of the following months. I think the first time I had really been conscious since her death was her birthday, which was in June. So just a few months after.
When's her
Her
birthday?
birthday is June 10th,
June 10th.
just over 3 months. During that time where I wasn't really there, I had actually been on an antidepressant that kind of muted my emotions. And it was a very difficult thing for me to feel those emotions. I think for that reason, I didn't attend her memorial. I feel like it had all happened so quickly after her death that I was still in shock in a way. It was held in a church. I'm personally not a Christian. I don't really find comfort in Christian values. My sister did, and that's why it was there, and I understand that, and I'm respecting that. But for me, I didn't want to mourn in that way. I feel like that wasn't going to be helpful for me, and it would be more for everyone else. And that's kind of something that I've learned throughout this, is that it's okay to grieve in your own way. You don't have to grieve in a way that just makes everyone else happy. My grieving process has been drastically different than the rest of my family. Both my older sisters, I feel like they kind of feel regret for not being as close with her. You know, my family, just in general, feels regret for not being able to see those signs faster. And although I also feel those same griefs and that same guilt, I feel that in my way, I was also kind of accepting of it faster than everyone else because I knew what she was going through. I knew how she felt for the most part. And I knew that although she's not here with us anymore, she's continuing to work on herself and she's finding herself in the afterlife. And that is the most important thing.
How has your family dealt with it? One thing that happened in my own family, it's almost like my brothers and I, it's always this tremendous void in a family, right? Because I know there's 5 girls in your family and there's 4 boys and me and my family, and you and I are both smack in the middle, like we talked about. And I always felt like, I mean, it's going to be 8 years in February for me. And I think of my brother every single day and I talk to him every single day. So 8 years feels like a snap. It's the weirdest thing. I say this all the time. I'm like, grief is the weirdest thing. It's very difficult to put language to it because it's not like I cry about my brother every day, but I'm aware of him being gone every day. And yet I believe in the afterlife and our spirit lives on. So I talk to him every day, but I get that I'm not going to physically hug him again. I can't have a conversation with him again. And what's wild about the grieving process is that you learn to take that loss and weave it into the fabric of your life and you bring that spirit of who they are forward. But it takes a long time. And like you said, there are no clocks, there are no calendars, there's no timeline on grief, but people move on in our life. They have to, right? I mean, life moves on. But I think for those of us who are grieving, and I go back to being a sibling grieving, I write about it, but even now I find myself at a loss for words of how to describe sibling loss, because there's this beautiful saying, and I can't remember the author, but parents lose the past, the spouse and kids, if there are any, lose the future, and us siblings lose both because you think you're going to grow old with your sibling. And so How does your family, do you guys talk about it as a family? Is it awkward? Like, what has it been like in your family unit since your sister's death?
I had already been really struggling with keeping that relationship afloat with my family prior to my sister's death. And I feel like after her death, it's just been 10 times harder. I can't remember the last time I had a conversation with my stepmom about my sister, if at all. I don't know if we've even talked about her since her death. With my dad, I don't mention it very much because he's the only one who really knows. He's the only one that read her letter. He's the only one that really knows what was going on. If I mention it too much to him, it's just going to backtrack his progress. And I don't want to do that to him. With my older sisters, it's a lot easier. You know, we talk about Leah all the time. My oldest sister, actually, we have had several hours and hours long conversations about her, about all of our memories with her, about who she would have been. You know, she was a year away from graduating high school. I can only imagine how free she would have been if she had just been able to hang on just a little bit longer. And I feel like that's kind of like the most that we can do is just think about what she could have been, think about who she was, and how that kind of translates into our grieving process. Because it is a very difficult thing. Grief is a very, like you said, it's a very weird thing. And everyone does it differently. Everyone has different opinions on a person. Everyone has a different view of that person. My view of my sister is completely different than my dad's. It's completely different than my stepmom's. It's completely different than all of my sisters. We all have a very different relationship with her. And so none of our grieving processes have ever been the same. They've been similar in ways, but everyone goes through it differently.
I want to share something with you and the rest of our listeners that you said that is another one of those misnomers that I think we all believe. It's around not wanting to mention our siblings' name to our parents. This is a theme that's all through my book. I ran grief and loss groups for 5 years after my brother's death at the Center for Grieving Children in Portland. And this theme of we don't want to mention our siblings' name because our parents start crying, then we feel guilty, right? And so I never mentioned my brother's name at all to my parents because I couldn't bear their pain. It was excruciating to be in their pain. So one thing that I learned at the Center for Grieving Children is that it's just the opposite. It's not as though when we bring up our sibling's name, our parents forget. It's with them every single day. It's with us every day. It's with them every day too. And that they really want to talk about their child. Now, I say that because I asked my dad, Dad, I don't bring Rocky's name up because I'm afraid it's going to hurt you. And he's like, oh my God, I will talk about Rocky anytime anyone will let me. And so something that I offer up to you, Hannah, and also anyone listening, can also ask your parents, do you want to talk about, Leah? Is it okay for us to talk about Leah? Because maybe there are parents out there that don't want to talk about their child, but that's not been my experience. And sometimes that can be a very healing thing when you kind of name that white elephant in the room because it's always with us all. So I just wanted to say that. But what I wanted to ask you is what have you done in terms of getting help around your sister's death, if at all? Is it friendships? Do you write in a journal? Do you see a therapist? Do you talk to your significant other? How have you processed the emotions around your sister's death? Or do you feel like you haven't yet processed your emotions around her death?
I feel as though it's a bit of both. In September of 2020, I had started seeing a therapist, and that was something that my sister had told me she was very proud of me about. And so after her death, I kind of felt a bit of an obligation. I was like, I have this opportunity to have this help. So I need to take advantage of it while I can because she wasn't able to. So during my entire 3-month blackout period with my sister, I was going to weekly therapy sessions with my therapist. I was, sending her private messages and saying, this is what's going on right now. Is there any way that you have any advice of how I can deal with this until our next appointment? I am forever grateful for my therapist. She has helped me through so much. She's helped me through hell and back. It is insane. So that was a very big part of those 3 months. Following those 3 months, I continued to go to therapy until September 2021. Unfortunately, I had to stop because of financial issues. I wasn't making enough of my job to do that. I do have plans to go back into therapy soon. I have a new job now. So hopefully I'll have that financial stability to be able to do that because I would really love to. So I think that that was a very big part. Additionally, I think that talking to my sister's friends, I have become so much closer to her friends now more than ever. You know, following her death, I immediately reached out to them and said, "Hey, how are you doing? Are you all right? Is there anything I can do? Do you want to talk about anything?" Because I can only imagine how that must feel to be, you know, they were closer to her in her last days than I was. And I can only imagine how hard that must be for them to be like, "Oh, we didn't see that. Why didn't we see that? How did that happen?" And so that's something that I've really tried to do is reach out to them. You know, we talk about memories of Leah, we talk about her final days, we talk about how funny she was, how caring she was, what kind of person she was. And I think that that is also something that has really helped me to be able to handle a little bit better because I was like, you know, she had such a great support system. And I am so happy that she was able to be surrounded by these people every day. And I think that the combination of those two things together has really been the number one thing that's helped me going.
It's a long process. And I think the other piece to this is something I write about also in my book, is guilt. Not everybody carries guilt after somebody's death. And I'm not talking just when someone takes their own life, but anytime we lose somebody unexpectedly, which anyone who's lost a young sibling has lost somebody unexpectedly, unless it's been a lengthy, illness or something like that. I talk very explicitly about my guilt with my brother after his death. And you have noted during this interview that it sounds like you also have been carrying some guilt with your sister. And I want to talk a little bit about guilt, but first I want to hear specifically, have you dealt with that guilt? And if so, how? Or are you still carrying guilt over your sister's death?
I felt myself a little bit with the guilt that I carry. As I mentioned, I was never a very big I love you person. And that's something that is my biggest regret, is that I didn't tell her enough how much she meant to me. And so now that she's gone, like you said, I truly believe that she's still around us, just on a different plane of existing.
I believe the same thing.
Anytime I have the chance, I talk to her and I say, "Oh, this is what I'm doing today. This is how I'm feeling. This is what I wished that we would have been doing today. This is how I wish you would have been doing." Something big that I say is that, I don't know if this is really relevant, but something big that I have noticed myself saying a lot is, "I'm not sure where you are, but wherever in the void you are, I hope you're doing well. And I care about you and I love you. And I really hope that you're finding yourself, how you wish you would here." It's such a weird thing. And I feel so weird sometimes talking to her because I'm like, oh, people can probably see me driving my car, having a full blown conversation with myself. And they're probably like, what is going on? But at the same time, I'm like, you know what? It doesn't matter. It's my journey. It is how I am able to deal with things. I am slowly getting over that guilt every time I talk to her because sometimes I swear I can feel her there having that conversation with me and that I can kind of sense that she understands and that she's nodding her head along or she's singing songs with me or she's there. And although that guilt is still very much in my heart and it's still weighing on me every single day, I know that she's helping me get through it slowly.
Hannah, one thing that I did, and I try not to do, any therapy on the show, but I want to pass this along to you because it helped me to start to cry. One of the most debilitating things for me during the healing journey was my guilt. Brother lived in Bali and I didn't talk to him as much as I wish that I had. Look, I'm going to cry. So one thing that helped around guilt was writing him a letter and telling him everything I wanted to tell him, and then writing a letter back to myself from him. It might sound corny for listeners, but it's very powerful. And you can even do two different letters. You can write a letter back exactly what you want to hear, and then you can write a letter back think what they'd say, what you think. One response is everything you want to hear from your sister, and then the second letter is what you think she would actually say. And it can be very fun and playful because whether or not people believe that our soul lives on, I think that that healing can happen one of two ways. Those of us who do believe the soul lives on, we sit and chat to our siblings. But for anybody out there who doesn't hold that same belief that our siblings live on, you can still hold them and have conversation in our hearts, right? We can still do that because that person that we've lost, I mean, no matter what the last things we said, I interviewed this one young woman who had a fight with her brother before he died and the guilt that she carried. But really, we know who loves us, right? I mean, even when we fight with somebody, we know that person still loves us, right?
Mhm.
And just meeting you today and not knowing your sister, knowing that sister knew how much you loved her because we feel love more than we hear love. Does that make sense? We
Mhm.
feel it at a heart connection. So, like I said, whether or not we believe that the soul lives on, we still carry the spirit and the heart of that person with us all the time. I can feel your love for your sister as we're sitting here. I can see it, I can feel it. And just as you could feel your sister's love, right? Like you mentioned that your sister would run around and tell everybody how much she loved them. But my guess is, even more than her words, you could feel your sister's love. Is that true?
That's very true. I think that the two of us just, as I said, she told everyone how much she cared about them. But I feel like for me and her, it was different. We didn't really tell each other. We more of like showed it through actions or like, hey, this made me think of you. Or hey, you should do this. It'll look good. Different form, like you said. You could feel it.
Yeah. And that's the power of love. Think about it this way, you guys, anybody listening, that when you love somebody and they're away from you, you can still feel that connection, right? You can feel that love. It's the same in death. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt like a knife going through the heart because we all know that it does. It is so painful. And the irony of being alive is that we get the deep gift of love. And the flip side to that is the deep hurt when that person is gone. And so, Hannah, where are you now with your process of losing your sister? And I know you said you talk to her every day and you become friends with her friends. Is there anything else that you do that you want to share to all of the listeners out there that are also deeply grieving the loss of their sibling?
I would like to say that probably the most influential thing for me that has helped me through this is having the outlet to be able to tell my sister's story. I'm on TikTok. I make a ton of videos about my sister, whether that be the happy parts or the sad parts or kind of like anger, why did you leave me? That kind of thing. I think that being able to have that outlet and hearing from people their own experiences. I've had several people send me private messages on Instagram and TikTok telling me, oh, I just lost this person. Is there any way that you can give me some advice how to get through this because I'm at a loss? And being able to help those people and say, well, it's not going to be the same as me. It's going to be your own journey. And it's something that's going to take you a long time to figure out. Being able to help those people and have that kind of, I guess, guidance has really been something that's been able to help me out throughout my journey.
Hannah, before we get into your TikTok channel, my last question is always around self love. I think the most challenging time in my life to show myself self love was when I was grieving, because really, for the most part, I just wanted to curl up in a ball and I wanted to stay in bed and I wanted to not feel, right? But that is not an option. I mean, the one thing that had happened for me after my brother's death is I wanted to live more than ever to honor his life. And at the same time, I was so deeply grieving, I didn't want to get up, right? So you can see that that was very conflictual because we got to give ourselves the grace of grieving. We have to give ourselves that space. So, what does it look like to love self through grieving? That is a difficult question, I know, but I have to ask, what does it look like for you?
Self-love during grieving is, like you said, it's an extremely hard thing to do because while grieving, all you can think about is the other person and what they could have been, who they were, what their impact was, and what it means that they're not gone. I didn't take care of myself for a very long time after my sister's death. And it was very, very difficult for me to get up every morning and say, all right, time to live the day. But most recently, I have realized that although she's not here, she wouldn't want me to just sit around. She wants me to do well in school. One of the last things she told me is, you're going to make a great teacher. And there's been so many times in the past 10 months that I felt like maybe I don't want to do teaching, but I think about that every single day. And I think, she thinks I would make a great teacher. That's saying something. She wasn't usually a good fan of school. She's kind of been like my guidance throughout this entire process. She has inspired me even beyond the grave to better myself and keep pushing forward and live life for her, because she's not here to do that anymore.
I love that so much. The other thing that I will say, that even when it's hard to get out of bed, eat, drink water, and try to do some form of exercise every single day. It all sounds so silly and cliche, but you know what? If you can manage those 3 things every single day, eat, drink water, and some form of exercise, even if that's all you can manage, maybe it's a 5-minute walk, right, Hannah? Because exercising to me, and I'm a big exerciser, but I'll tell you, it felt like there were stones in my feet. My legs, everything's heavy. So that movement, making sure you're hydrated, even though everything feels like a challenge, I can promise anyone listening, those 3 small things are 3 small ways to take care of yourself during one of the most challenging, traumatic events in your life, to lose your sibling. All right, Hannah, I know I've kept us over on this particular interview. Can you tell us where we can find you on TikTok and Instagram? We'll also have these in the show notes for everyone who is listening. But Hannah, if you could tell us, that would be wonderful.
TikTok and Instagram, I'm both the same. I'm both at Legally Irresponsible. Legally as in like legally blonde, and irresponsible as in I'm not responsible. So it's the same on both of them.
All right. And I'll also have the title of my book, Rock On, after my brother's name, Mining for Joy in the Deep River of Sibling Grief, as well, where I interviewed people all over the world who share about their own siblings. So Hannah, thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you, all of our listeners. And we'll see you guys here next week. Bye for now.